Cindy. Here with Life Coach Cindy Chavez. Today is Wednesday, December the 4th, 2019. It is 4 p.m. in New York, but wherever you are in the world, thanks for joining us for another episode of LOA Today, your daily dose of happy. And I'm happy to be back to doing this again with Cindy after a couple of weeks off, but we spoke before the podcast. You told me you had a great holiday. I'm glad to hear that. I know I did too. I hope our listeners did. But quiet, you said it was. Quiet is something that is not often associated with the Thanksgiving holiday. So.
Right. Yeah, we did. We had a really quiet holiday this time. Just 4 of us. Usually it's a really big crowd, but this year everybody sort of went in different directions. And so we really didn't know what we were doing until almost the last minute. And we were just like, everybody is making all these different plans. So we're just going to have Thanksgiving here. And my oldest was with us and his friend, and it was just so nice. It was just nice and quiet. And hopefully, Hanukkah, Christmas will maybe make some more noise and get more people involved. But it was nice to have a 4-day stretch of very peaceful, just quiet time. We didn't do anything, super significant, but just enjoyed each other's company and relaxed and took our little electric bicycle out and tooled around town. And
nice.
It was just nice. We had pretty weather. That was nice.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. Do you have snow? Did you have snow over Thanksgiving?
We do. Yeah, we got, well, not over Thanksgiving, but over the last couple of days, we got 10 inches of snow. So,
10 inches? Really?
Yeah.
I don't know why I didn't know about this. We've got family that's, everybody's moving everywhere, and we have family that's moved to Colorado, and so I've been watching, that part of the country because they got like 6 inches of snow in one day, but, I wasn't watching your part of the country.
Surprise.
Wow.
It was one of those things too. They were, you know how it is. They can change. It's going to be 3 to 5 inches. No, it's going to be 8 to 10. No, it's going to be 6 to 9. It was like all over the place. And the last we heard was that it was going to be 3 to 6, and we woke up to 10. So.
Oh, so how do you prepare for that? Do you have to do like what we do when we have a hurricane coming, and that's like just make sure you're stocked up on everything and make sure the tank is full of gas? I don't know, because.
I mean, there's always that risk of a power outage, but.
Right.
It's. I don't even worry about it anymore, to be perfecly honest.
Really?
I mean, I know that the shelves of the supermarkets get cleared out every time that there's some storm coming. But actually, now that I think about it, we knew the storm was coming on Sunday and Monday, and on Friday, Louise and I were out. There was a special event here in town, in the town of Simsbury, Connecticut, called Simsbury Celebrates, which is basically where they have all these really cool outside activities for kids to do in the cold of December. But it's like Christmas-related stuff and winter-related stuff, and people are serving hot chocolate, and hot apple cider, and so there's plenty of ways to keep warm. But it's just a very popular event. Lots and lots of people come out to it. So we're out doing that, and then we're running around after that doing some errands, and we stopped off at a grocery store to pick up one item. And Louise says, "Is there anything else we need while we're here?" And I said, "Well, the storm's coming. Maybe we should do our shopping." "Oh, okay." So we just went and did our shop. It was so easy. There was no stress to any of it.
Nice.
At all. Yeah. And then we got home and learned that the next couple of days that all of a sudden the whole thing got ramped up. I mean, it just kind of flowed.
Yeah.
Which is what's supposed to happen. When you're in that good vibrational place, that's what's supposed to happen, right?
That's nice. Yeah.
And that's exactly what was happening. We didn't sweat it. We didn't get worried about it. We just said, okay, storm, big deal. Not going to let that one ruin our day. And it didn't. And in fact, Louise loved it because she loves the first snow of the year. I mean, she gets excited. She goes out and jumps up and down. I mean, she'll throw snowballs. I mean, she just has a great time with the first snow of the year. So,
Well, that's nice. I'm glad you got everything done and it was easy and, wasn't one of those times where you walk into the grocery store, wait, there's a storm coming, and then you walk in and realize everything's wiped out. It's like, oh, empty shelves. Yeah, no, this is much better. Just flow along with it.
Well, I think that was law of attraction again. We were actually there a couple days before the storm, so people hadn't had a chance to get there to clean out the shelves.
Yeah.
So everything we wanted was just right there. There was no issue at all. It was so simple.
Perfect. How are the cats doing?
Joy's having a little time of it because he is so used to being outside. He's been getting a lot of TLC because it's hard for him.
Yeah, I know he doesn't like the snow, and he does love to be out there. So
Absolutely, yeah.
Aw.
And plus,
Well.
we had that little incident last winter, and I think that has kind of stuck with him in his mind. So he doesn't
It stuck with me, and all I did was hear about it.
hear about it, right? It stuck with Louise too. She didn't even want to be remembering it again.
Right.
But yeah, I think it kind of affected him too. So he's been getting a lot of lap time. Let's put it that way, which is very unusual.
So it's working for him on some level.
It's working. That's right.
That's right. So we've got a brand new book to start today.
Absolutely. Well,
Neville
Wednesday's Neville Day. If we weren't doing something Neville on Wednesday, I think we lose half of our fans. But no, it's great. We do have more books left too. We have a couple more books left, and then we'll figure out what we'll do after that. But
Yeah. So what about announcements?
well, the newest announcement that I've been doing the last few days is that of the resurrection, I guess you might call it, of the Pivot Pals group on Facebook, where we are inviting people in, and listeners are starting to come in, basically inviting people in to join us in sharing with each other little vignettes, to use our word, little vignettes that we're trying to use to attract things into our lives. And I've got to tell you, our people are really creative. Our listeners are very, very, Jeffrey in particular. Jeffrey, of course, who's like our main live streamer. Hello, Jeffrey. And by the way, my live stream isn't working properly, so I can't actually see the live stream. But I'm sure Jeffrey's there because he's always there. Jeffrey is a master, an absolute master at infinite level of detail of his vignettes. I mean,
that's excellent.
Really in depth. Yeah,
Yes.
You can feel it. You can taste the flavors. You can see the colors. I mean, it's just so well thought out. So the bar's been set kind of high. It doesn't mean that everybody else has to meet that bar. I'm just saying, if you want to have an idea of how to put a vignette together, just read Jeffrey's vignettes. He does
That's
a great
awesome.
job of them. Yeah. Really,
I think
really
that's wonderful. In the way that we talk so often about stories, how stories make such an impact.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's because it helps us, really have a concrete idea of how something plays out.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can relate to them because we
Yes.
all have our own stories, right? And so in the same way, I love to hear about a vignette somebody's created because it gives my creative part of my brain more ideas of how to do this.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love it. So that's fantastic.
Other people have been following the cues. I put in 2 or 3 different vignettes. Jeffrey's put in a few, and some other listeners who are names that I don't recognize, but they tell me they've been listening for months or even years. They're putting in some really cool vignettes too, which is great. I'm loving
awesome.
it.
I need to get over there and put mine in there. So
Yeah. So anybody, feel free to just do a search on Facebook for Law of Attraction Pivot Pals, and we'll let you into the group, and you can start participating. And the general theme that we're following is you post a vignette, or anyone can post a vignette, and we're wanting everybody to go in and weigh in on, I love that, congratulations, help build the energy of it, and so forth. And then we're strongly suggesting, once you post a vignette, go back and revisit it the next day, and then the next day, and the next, and the next, because that's the activity, right? We want to be doing this as a daily activity to keep reinforcing our subconscious mind to practice it, right? So that's really why I resurrected the group. I figured, what better way to do it in a very safe environment, because it's a private group.
Right.
It's a safe place, so you know that you're not going to get, ragged on for, you're doing that LOA stuff,
Yeah.
It's all going to be 100% supportive. So
Every time I hear you say you resurrect the group, I'm like, you really have been reading Neville, huh?
Yeah. And you hear that coming out of my mouth, absolutely.
Right? I have to say, as we go into this book, and you and I have both told our listeners this before, over and over, probably. It might get like broken record, but neither one of us are Christians.
Right.
And the fact that Neville was so heavily laden with scripture, some books more than others, was the thing that kept us both from really diving into Neville at some time.
It's true.
Time passed. And then at some point, I just decided I guess it was long enough for me and my separation from some of these beliefs that I didn't have such an emotional charge around them anymore. And I was like, I'm just going to read this because I was getting so much out of some of his stuff that was less, full of Bible verses, that I just wanted to see what he was saying. And I also understood that everything he's using is always so metaphorical and so not literal that I was like, you know what, I can do this. And then you and I did a book or two, and we talked about this many times about, I know. It's like, and I still get sometimes when we're in a book that I'm just reading all of these Bible verses from the Christian Bible, I want to kind of laugh because it's like, if you would have told me 10 years ago I would be doing this, I would have just said, no way. There's no way. But it goes to show you, if we keep an open mind about how we interpret things, and like I have been saying a lot lately, I rarely really say I believe anything anymore. People will ask me when I'm their coach, do you believe whatever? Do you believe this or that? And my answer has been, I don't really believe anything. I just like to entertain certain possibilities. And if you recognize that that's a really good place to be sometimes, right? To just say, I'm not saying whether I believe this or not, but I'm going to entertain the possibility that it might be true. That really unlocks something in your subconscious that has a resistance to believing or not believing something. It's like, you know what? Let's just entertain the possibility that it may or may not be true. It could be true. Let's just pretend. Because that's really all we're doing when we're imagining something, right?
It's interesting that you're saying that, because it's particularly using the word belief. And I say that because for me, belief was kind of along the lines of what you were just describing. It was one of those boogeyman words, like I didn't want to have anything to do with a belief. It was too close to religion for me.
Yeah.
And then I started reading Abraham Hicks. And Abraham Hicks said, a belief is nothing more than a thought you think over and over again. And it gobsmacked me, like, oh my God, that's exactly what a belief is. And it completely changed the landscape for me. I thought of belief in entirely new ways just because of that one teaching. So now, later on, you and I start looking at Neville Goddard. Oh, there's all that Bible verse stuff and so forth. Yeah, but I feel differently about beliefs now. Sure, I haven't, rejoined the church or anything like that. But for me, a belief is an entirely different animal at this point.
Right.
So because of that, because I was able to shift it into something, I pivoted my belief about belief to a different thing, Yeah. And in the process of making that pivot, all of a sudden, just thinking about a belief felt better. It felt much more within my control. It fit my whole spiritual, philosophical scope a whole lot better. And I knew that I was reading an author who himself treated scriptural writing completely differently from the way the church does. So now, all of a sudden, it was accessible to me. I found a way to let it in a way that I could handle. And that's really all it's about.
Yeah, right. And that's why I'm saying it's sometimes I guess this is maybe not just for me to say, but for, people to hear as well, is that whether or not you believe this, in any certain way, it's sort of not important at this point. It's just like, okay, I'm willing to hear this and see if it's, if it's a valid potential for me to think about. That's all. So that helped me a lot too.
The way you said that, I don't remember exactly how you said it, but the gist of it was, I usually answered that I don't really believe. I consider possibilities.
Yeah, I'm willing to entertain the possibility.
Yeah. And the way you were using that word belief is exactly the way I always thought of a belief in the past. That it was the same feeling with me. I didn't want to be a believer because a believer had certain connotations with it.
Well, and in personal growth circles, in law of attraction circles, in coaching circles, the word belief is often preceded by the modifier limiting.
Yes, right. To make matters worse.
Right? So, and I recognize that a lot of beliefs are limiting. So, I kind of just, it's not that important. I think it's...
Well, even that I've developed a new viewpoint on. Because now I understand, well, actually, I think all beliefs are limiting.
I do too.
So we agree on that. And I think probably most of our listeners agree with that. I think we'll probably also agree that just because it's limiting doesn't mean it's bad.
Well, I don't do good and bad.
Well, I know, I know, but that's the thing that's always hanging in the background. Like, oh,
Right.
geez, I don't want to be limited in my beliefs. Well, yeah, actually, we do. We actually prefer to be limited in a lot of our beliefs.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, there are
The better part of us wants to be limited.
For instance, the belief that the Earth is round and that it is covered with cities and towns and nature and so forth is not a belief most of us want to give up.
Right.
We would actually feel very uncomfortable without that
I'm
belief.
slightly shocked that there's a big group of people that have, but yeah, no. Right, exactly.
So limiting beliefs are great.
Yeah.
It's just a question of whether it serves us, that's all.
Yeah, that there's certain beliefs I'm not going to entertain.
Right.
Right. So as we dive into this one, and I said all of that to say, as Walt and I were going through this selection process, we kept choosing from the very beginning, choosing the books that were the least religious in nature. We're saying, oh, I think this one has like fewer scriptures. Okay. And then, of course, we got down to the bottom of the barrel where there's only 2 books left, and they are both just like loaded with Bible verses. So as we dive in, this is just a little things to ponder as we begin our process of.
It also shows how much we have been able to come to understand Neville in his own terminology, in his own way of thinking about his own belief system, and to accept it because we can integrate with our thinking, with our way of understanding stuff. So we've actually, by looking at these books now, we're basically saying, okay, we've done some growing, we've done some building.
Yes, and you know what else is that I can say from years of experience in religious systems, especially in the systems that are more towards the fundamentalist end of the spectrum, is that one of the things that happens to people in any kind of fundamentalism, and you and I've talked about this before, I see fundamentalism creeps in everywhere. It's in LOA. It's everywhere, right? What happens is that we suddenly start shutting out anything that we can't already decide it's going to line up with what we say we believe. So it's like, oh, I'm not going to read anything that person writes. They don't believe what I believe. Mm-hmm. And we become so narrow in what we will accept. And I didn't want to be doing the same thing again with saying, oh, no, I don't believe Christianity, so I'm not going to read this. Because then I'm right back in that place of rejecting everything that isn't just like me. Yeah. So I'm like, no, let's just dive in and see what he has to say.
And we've gotten a lot out of it. It's been very useful. Very good information.
Very true. Yeah. So this book has 9 chapters. I have no idea how fast we'll get through it. Sometimes one chapter has taken us an eternity, and other times we've zipped through.
We should probably tell people what the name of the book is.
The name of the book is Seedtime and Harvest.
And it has a subtitle, A Mystical View of the Scriptures.
Ah, I don't have that in my copy.
I have that in the compendium that we both have. Yeah.
Thank you for chiming in with that.
Yeah, and apparently published 1956.
So I really, lately we've noticed how much Neville quotes from Blake. Mm-hmm. A lot.
Yes.
And I particularly love this verse that he opens with in chapter 1. Chapter 1 title, The End of a Golden String. And he quotes from Blake, I give you the end of a golden string, only wind it into a ball. It will lead you in at heaven's gate, built in Jerusalem's wall. From Blake. Mm-hmm. I think it's a beautiful little piece of poetry. And he says in the following essays, I've tried to indicate certain ways of approach to the understanding of the Bible and the realization of your dreams. Then he quotes from Hebrews, that ye be not slothful, but followers of them who through faith and patience inherit the promises. He says, many who enjoy the old familiar verses of Scripture are discouraged when they themselves try to read the Bible as they would any other book, because, quite excusably, they do not understand that the Bible is written in the language of symbolism, not knowing that all of its characters are personifications of the laws and functions of mind, that the Bible is psychology rather than history. They puzzle their brains over it for a while and then give up.
Or in my case, actually just, go in the bathroom and throw up. But no, that's another story.
They puzzle their brains over it for a while and then throw up, according to me. It's all too mystifying. To understand the significance of its imagery, the reader of the Bible must be imaginatively awake. According to the scriptures, we sleep with Adam and wake with Christ. That is, we sleep collectively and wake individually. And when I read that sentence the first time, I thought, I loved it because of the idea, and we talk about this all the time, that sometimes people get upset in LOA circles when people are taking any kind of action because there's this lopsided idea that cropped up somewhere that, no action is necessary.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, I frequently point out that there are over 7 billion people on the planet and that not all of them are conscious creators. And that's why I love this, we sleep with Adam and wake with Christ. That is, we sleep collectively and we wake individually. So everybody's on their own path, and you are far, far ahead than some other people who will eventually come into this, kind of knowledge or their own awakening of whatever it is. And it's a good thing for us to remember is that, everyone awakes individually. He quotes from Genesis, and the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept. Neville says if Adam, or generic man, is in a deep sleep, then his experiences as recorded in the scriptures must be a dream. Only he who is awake can tell his dream, and only he would understand the symbolism of dreams can interpret the dream. Then he quotes from Luke, and they said one to another, did not our heart burn within us while he talked with us by the way, and while he opened to us the scriptures? The Bible is a revelation of the laws and functions of mind expressed in the language of that twilight realm into which we go when we sleep. Because the symbolical language of this twilight realm is much the same for all men, the recent explorers of this realm, human imagination, call it the collective unconscious. The purpose of this book, however, is not to give you a complete definition of biblical symbols or exhaustive interpretations of its stories. All I hope to have done is to have indicated the way in which you are most likely to succeed in realizing your desires. What things soever you desire can be obtained only through the conscious, voluntary exercise of imagination in direct obedience to the laws of mind. Somewhere within this realm of imagination, there is a mood, a feeling of the wish fulfilled, which, if appropriated, means success to you. This realm, this Eden, your imagination, is vaster than you know and repays exploration. I give you the end of a golden string. You must wind it into a ball.
It's interesting how he ties that poem that he began with from Blake into something more tangible.
I love it.
Yeah. He's essentially saying that golden string is, okay, this is your opportunity. Go. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
It's completely up to you what you're going to do next. I mean, in the poem, it's only wind it into a ball, but winding it into a ball could represent literally anything that you have in mind doing. And, we kind of opened this up by talking about how you and I came to this, about how our own spiritual backgrounds influenced our willingness or early on unwillingness
resistance, right?
to look at Neville. If I had read this early on, I would have found this really, really confusing. Now that we've read a lot of Neville's stuff, this just kind of flowed. This made a whole lot of sense to me, especially when he says, many who enjoy the old familiar verses of Scripture are discouraged when they themselves try to read the Bible. I would have stopped right there back then, at the beginning of our exploration.
Oh, yeah, right? Because you're like, and now you're going to explain it to me. Okay, no way.
And I would have missed the part that he says they do not understand that the Bible is written in the language of symbolism. Instead, I would have interpreted that as, well, everybody has their own symbolic interpretation of the Bible, so okay, here we go with Neville. One more in here. Not at all what he meant. But that's
right.
The kind of the danger of language in a sense.
I also think it's interesting that he says, basically, I'm paraphrasing, but, I'm not here to give you a whole bunch of symbolic meanings. So, I'm just here so that you can understand that you can have whatever you desire. I want you to understand how to do that. And so that's what I'm doing. I thought that was very interesting that he didn't want to give us the decoder ring, it sounds like.
Which is, I don't think he is refusing to give us the decoder ring. I think what he's refusing to do is to write the entire glossary.
Well, and set it in stone. You know what I'm saying? Set it in stone. Yeah. He's like, no, you don't need to know that. You just need to be able to use your own imagination.
Yeah. He's essentially saying, don't worry about what all that stuff says in the Bible. Just, don't even drive yourself nuts with that. There's only one thing you really need to get out of it. Here's how you can reach your heart's desires. That's what you need to know.
He also has many times said, that I can explain my own experiences to you. Mm-hmm. And no one else can, you have to have your own experiences.
Yes.
Right? And so I feel like that's what he's saying here too, is look, I'm not going to give you a big rundown of every single symbol and what it means to me. Like, I want you to use your imagination here. It's kind of like, do the work. I'm not going to do the work for you, and I don't want to burden you with a bunch of definitions. I just want you to understand this one thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Which he does very well, by the way, very consistently from book to book, from chapter to chapter.
Yeah.
You how in this particular chapter, which is only a couple pages, it's one of the short ones that he writes. He starts the process of drawing the symbolic representations, but he doesn't do it as much as I would have thought of in a first chapter. This is again one of the reasons we stayed away because we knew there was all this Bible verse stuff going on,
right.
And he doesn't just come out and just start saying, "Okay, here's what they all line up to." It's more like, no, I'm just kind of reference them, keep them in the background, but here's what we're really talking about. Yeah. Not what I would have expected.
I know, me either. But I think he's going to hit us harder in the next chapter.
He probably will. But he's being nice to us, is what he's doing.
So this chapter, and I think these are all separate essays. That's what it sounded like in his introductory chapter. He says the purpose of these essays. This one is called The Four Mighty Ones. He begins with a quote from Genesis, "And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted and became into four heads." Then he quotes from Ezekiel, "And everyone had four faces." And then he quotes from Daniel, "I see four men, loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the fourth is like the Son of God." And then he quotes from Blake, "Four mighty ones are in every man." The four mighty ones constitute the selfhood of man, or God in man. There are four mighty ones in every man, but these four mighty ones are not four separate beings, separated one from the other, as are the fingers of his hand. The four mighty ones are four different aspects of his mind, and differ from one another in function and character, without being four separate selves inhabiting one man's body. The four mighty ones may be equated with the four Hebrew characters, Yod, He, Vav, He, from right to left, which form the four-lettered mystery name of the creative power, from and combining with itself the past, present, and future forms of the verb to be. I'll say something that those four letters are called the Tetragrammaton, and they are supposed to be the name of God, but he puts in brackets. I don't know if you have these brackets. He says Yahweh, or even occasionally Jehovah. And of course, most people have heard those particular pronunciations. But in Judaism, that word is not spoken because no one knows how to pronounce it. And so we don't pronounce it. It doesn't get pronounced. And so the characters, Yod, He, Vav, He, are often substituted with the word Adonai, which means Lord. And it's called the Tetragrammaton. So just a little bit of background for that.
Interesting.
He says, here he goes. The Tetragrammaton is revered as the symbol of the creative power in man. I am. The creative function reaching forth to realize in actual material phenomena qualities latent in itself. We can best understand the four mighty ones by comparing them to the four most important characters in the production of a play. Now he's going to quote, is this Shakespeare? All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. As You Like It, Act 2, Scene 7. The producer, the author, the director, and the actor are the four most important characters in the production of a play. In the drama of life, the producer's function is to suggest the theme of a play. This he does in the form of a wish, such as, I wish I were successful. I wish I could take a trip. I wish I were married, and so on. But to appear on the world stage, these general themes must somehow be specified and worked out in detail. It is not enough to say, I wish I were successful. That is too vague. Successful at what? However, the first mighty one only suggests a theme. The dramatization of the theme is left to the originality of the second mighty one, the author. In dramatizing the theme, the author writes only the last scene of the play, but this scene he writes in detail. The scene must dramatize the wish fulfilled. He mentally constructs as lifelike a scene as possible of what he would experience had he realized his wish. When the scene is clearly visualized, the author's work is done. The third mighty one in the production of life's play is the director. The director's tasks are to see that the actor remains faithful to the script and to rehearse him over and over again until he's a natural in the part. This function may be likened to a controlled and consciously directed attention, an attention focused exclusively on the action which implies that the wish is already realized. The form of the fourth is like the Son of God, human imagination, the actor. This fourth mighty one performs within himself, in imagination, the predetermined action which implies the fulfillment of the wish. This function does not visualize or observe the action. This function actually enacts the drama and does it over and over again until it takes on the tones of reality. Without the dramatized vision of fulfilled desire, the theme remains a mere theme and sleeps forever in the vast chambers of unborn themes. Nor without the co-operant attention, obedient to the dramatized vision of fulfilled desire, will the vision perceived attain objective reality. The four mighty ones are the four quarters of the human soul. The first is Jehovah's King, who suggests the theme. The second is Jehovah's servant, who faithfully works out the theme in a dramatic vision. The third is Jehovah's man, who was attentive and obedient to the vision of the fulfilled desire, who brings the wandering imagination back to the script 70 times 7. The form of the fourth is Jehovah himself, who enacts the dramatized theme on the stage of the mind. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God. A verse from Philippians. The drama of life is a joint effort on the four quarters of the human soul. All that you behold, though it appears without, it is within, in your imagination, of which this world of mortality is but a shadow.
Can we just stop for a moment, because there's a lot of good stuff here that I want
Yes.
to tie together. Because this is actually, the first chapter was short. This chapter is fairly lengthy, so
it is.
I want to make sure we don't miss this part, because he lays out the four heads, if you will, the four mighty ones, and the first way he lays them out two different ways. The first way is as the producer, the author, the director, and the actor. The producer being the one who establishes the wish. The director, what's that?
Yes, I'm agreeing with you.
Oh, you're agreeing. Okay. The director being the one who essentially, I'm sorry, the author, I skipped one. The author being the one who writes the end of the play, writes the last scene of the play. The director being the one who essentially drives the script. I mean, that's my way of saying it, but that's what I have always seen a director being, the person who does, and as he says, this function may be likened to a controlled and consciously directed attention. And then the fourth being the actor. So there's one metaphor, one set of symbols: the producer, author, director, and actor. And then he brings in a second set of symbols. And I wanted to just take a moment to see if we can tie those symbols together, because the second set is where he says these four mighty ones are the four quarters of the human soul. The first is Jehovah's King, who suggests the theme. The second is Jehovah's Servant, who faithfully works out the theme in a dramatic vision. Third is Jehovah's Man, who was attentive and obedient to the vision of fulfilled desire. And the form of the fourth is Jehovah himself, who enacts the dramatized theme on the stage of the mind. So I'm feeling like this is decoder ring time.
Well, this part right here that you skipped, but I was looking for it earlier when you were talking about the director, the author, and the actor, was this part where he says who he would be, I believe, would be the director in the other metaphor, but here says the servant or Jehovah's Man, who he says brings the wandering imagination back to the script.
70 times 7, yes.
Yeah. So, and that really, hits me, because I recognize that is probably the most important part of practice, is just doing it. And that requires you to keep bringing your imagination, your wandering imagination, back over and over and over.
Mm-hmm. It's true. So if we kind of tie the two sets of symbols together, the producer, which is the same as Jehovah's King, is the one who establishes the wish.
Yes.
The author, who is the same as Jehovah's servant, interesting thing there, the author being the servant, is the one who faithfully works out the theme. In other words, creates that final scene, that final vignette, as you and I like to talk about it. The director is the equivalent of, how does he phrase it? Jehovah's Man, I guess he calls it, who is attentive and obedient to the vision of fulfilled desire. That's the one who, as you said, who brings back the wandering imagination back to the script over and over and over again. That's the part of us that we talk about, 80% of the time on the show, about how my mind is constantly being drawn off all these other things that I really don't want to be focusing my attention on. Yeah, the director brings me back to, here's what you really want to be focusing your attention on if you really want to have your desire come into fruition. Oh yeah, okay. Well, that Jehovah's Man, that's the man's role, by the way, is the role of the director. So man is the director. I want to make sure we really establish that. Man, in these two sets of things, when you tie it all together, man is the director. And then the final roles from the two different combinations is the actor being the person who performs it, who plays it out, and in the second set of symbols, it is Jehovah himself. So the actor is God. And
I want to point out that we haven't read this here. It's just my brain working here. But that the producer and the king are that first part that he says, a part of the soul. I would liken it to desire.
Yes.
Because that's the wish, right?
That is.
Producer comes up with the wish. I wish I were successful. I wish I were married. I wish I would go on a trip. What are the examples that he gave? And so I think it's interesting to say that desire is king.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think it's very interesting. And I think you're right. You've drawn that parallel exactly. The one that really stuck out to me the most was the last combination, where the actor is Jehovah himself. So often, and I think this kind of ties back to what we talked about earlier, about how we both have our own religious experience backgrounds that formed our way of thinking quite differently from many of our peers. But in the course of that development, we ended up with an entirely different viewpoint from what many people have, where many people have the viewpoint of God as being external. That's what I'm trying to get to.
Yes.
That God is outside of ourselves, that God is somebody that you worship, and so forth. And in these two sets of symbolic structures, he really quite clearly states that the actor is God. And who's the actor? It's us. It's
right.
An aspect of our soul.
And somewhere in today's reading, he did mention about you're not out picturing it. You're not watching yourself do it. You are doing it. And we've talked about this so many times in the vignettes that it's not like you're watching a movie where you see yourself over there doing the thing.
Yes.
You don't watch yourself go up the ladder. You feel the rungs under your feet. You feel your hands on the side of the ladder. It's you going up the ladder. You're in your body in this imagination. And so he said, so you're the actor. You're not watching someone else, and you're not looking at yourself over there. You're the actor. He says that actor is God.
And for me,
pretty plain.
I'll definitely speak for me on this one because I don't want to put words in your mouth or anyone else's mouth. But for me, that places a huge amount of responsibility in my court, because if I'm the actor and if actor is God, that means I am responsible as God. I mean, I am responsible for everything that I'm creating every moment of my life and of my previous and future lifetimes. I mean, I am constantly in creation mode. I am responsible for all of it. And I don't mean that in a blameworthy way. I just mean it as it's me. And it's such a huge concept. It's such a magnificently huge concept. It's so huge. I'm not even sure I've completely wrapped my brain around it, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, no, I get it.
But wow, the power that is in that combination, when I understand it that way, I mean, no wonder we get a little bit afraid to try things that sometimes like, oh my God, I have all this God power in me.
Right? Yeah.
What am I going to do this time to trip myself up because I applied all this power in a way I didn't really intend to? I think that's what the kind of the feeling is for me in the back of my mind. So what he's laid out here it really resonates with me for one thing. And it also reminds me, I really want to learn everything I can about how to master my own control over my own power, because I want to maximize the value that I get out of it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what he wants to teach us.
Yeah, I think so. So I just want to make sure we didn't skip that. This was a really important part in my view.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm glad that you chimed in. All right, let's see where he goes with this. He says, all that we behold is a visual construction contrived to express a theme which has been dramatized, rehearsed, and performed elsewhere. What we are witnessing on the stage of the world is an optical construction devised to express the themes which have been dramatized, rehearsed, and performed in the imagination of men. The four mighty ones constitute the selfhood of man, or God in man, and all that man beholds, though it appears without, are but shadows cast upon the screen of space, optical constructions contrived by selfhood to inform him in regard to the themes which he has conceived, dramatized, rehearsed, and performed within himself. The creature was made subject unto vanity, that he may become conscious of selfhood and its functions. For with consciousness of selfhood and its functions, he can act to a purpose. He can have a consciously self-determined history. Without consciousness, he acts unconsciously and cries to an objective God to save him from his own creation.
Exactly what we just talked about.
Right? And he quotes from Habakkuk, O Lord, how long shall I cry, and thou wilt not hear? Even cry out unto thee of violence, and thou wilt not save. Neville says, when man discovers that life is a play which he himself is consciously or unconsciously writing, he will cease from the blind self-torture of executing judgment upon others.
True.
Instead, he will rewrite the play to conform to his ideal, for he will realize that all changes in the play must come from the cooperation of the four mighty ones within himself. They alone can alter the script and produce the change. All the men and women in his world are merely players and are as helpless to change his play as the players on the screen of the theater to change the picture. The desired change must be conceived, dramatized, rehearsed, and performed in the theater of his mind. When the fourth function, the imagination, has completed its task of rehearsing the revised version of the play until it is natural, then the curtain will rise upon this so seemingly solid world, and the mighty four will cast a shadow of the real play upon the screen of space. men and women will automatically play their parts to bring about the fulfillment of the dramatized theme. The players, by reason of their various parts in the world's drama, become relevant to the individual's dramatized theme, and because relevant, are drawn into his drama. They will play their parts, faithfully believing all the while that it was they themselves who initiated the parts they play. This they do because, and he quotes from John, "Thou, Father, art in me, and I in thee. I in them, and thou in me." I am involved in mankind. We are one. We are all playing the four parts of producer, author, director, and actor in the drama of life. Some of us are doing it consciously, others unconsciously. It is necessary that we do it consciously. Only in this way can we be certain of a perfect ending to our play. Then we shall understand why we must become conscious of the four functions of the one God within ourselves, that we may have the companionship of God as his sons.
I want to stop once again because, and I'm jumping back a few minutes because you read quite a long section there, and there's one thing that has just been sticking in my mind. I'm going to go back to where it says, when the fourth function, the imagination, has completed its task of rehearsing the revised version of the play until it is natural, then the curtain will rise upon this so seemingly solid world, and the mighty four will cast a shadow of the real play upon the screen of space. You read that phrase, the fourth function. I realized, okay, well, we've been doing fours. We've been doing groups of fours. We've been doing the director, author, actor, and producer. We've been doing the four different variations of God. Here, the fourth function is imagination. And I realized, again, he was doing a Neville decoder ring thing. He was connecting
God.
Actor with God with imagination. The actor is the imaginer. The actor, not the producer, not the director,
right.
Not the author, the actor. And if there's anything that answers the question or answers the objection even of those who say, well, I should be able to just attract it, I shouldn't have to do anything, that answers it. Acting is where we do our imagining. Acting is the place where all the imagination happens. If you try to imagine without acting, you're basically cutting off your power.
Well, and the other thing that I see that happens that Neville hasn't mentioned yet here, but once we begin acting out in our imagination, but with us as the actor acting it out, it changes who we are in real life, for lack of a better term that comes to mind right now. But once we get up from our imagination and we open our eyes and we begin to go about our daily life and our day-to-day activities, we'll be doing it as that actor. We'll be doing it as a different person because that role that we're playing becomes so real that suddenly those are the shoes that we're walking in. And everything is different then. So it starts to play out in the actions that we take in our everyday life. There's more acting, more action, not just meditating. Right? It all starts to play out.
It's interesting you should use that word, meditating, too, because yesterday Dan Mangena, who's one of our news co-hosts, says he's been recommending to his followers lately, stop meditating. Not that he thinks that meditation is a bad idea, but just you're spending too much time in the meditation. Go on to the acting part. Do that part next. There's a balance there, for sure. All right. So he closes out this section that we just read with a quote from Angelus Silesius that says, "Man should not stay a man. His aim should higher be. For gods will only gods accept this company." And now I think Neville's going to tell us a story. I love this. Cool.
In January of 1946, I took my wife and little daughter to Barbados in the British West Indies for a holiday. Not knowing there were any difficulties in getting a return passage, I had not booked ours before leaving New York. Upon our arrival in Barbados, I discovered that there were only 2 ships serving the islands, one from Boston and one from New York. I was told there was no available space on either ship before September.
Ooh.
As I had commitments in New York for the first week in May, I put my name on the long waiting list for the April sailing. A few days later, the ship from New York was anchored in the harbor. I observed it very carefully and decided that this was the ship we would take. I returned to my hotel and determined on an interaction that would be mine were we actually sailing on that ship. I settled down in an easy chair in my bedroom to lose myself in this imaginative action. In Barbados, we take a motor launch or rowboat out into the deep harbor when we embark on a large steamer. I knew I must catch the feeling that we were sailing on that ship. I chose the interaction of stepping from the tender and climbing up the gangplank of the steamer. The first time I tried, my attention wandered after I had reached the top of the gangplank. I brought myself back down and tried again and again. I do not recall how many times I carried out this action in my imagination until I reached the deck and looked back at the port with the feeling of sweet sadness at departing. I was happy to be returning to my home in New York, but nostalgic in saying goodbye to the lovely island and to our family and friends. I do recall that in one of my many attempts at walking up the gangplank, in the feeling that I was sailing, I fell asleep. After I awoke, I went about the usual social activities of the day and the evening. The following morning, I received a call from the steamship company requesting me to come down to their office and pick up our tickets for the April sailing. I was curious to know why Barbados had been chosen to receive the cancellation and why I, at the end of a long waiting list, was to have the reservation. But all that the agent could tell me was that a cable had been received that morning from New York offering passage for 3. I was not the first the agent had called, but for reasons she could not explain, those she had called said that they now found it inconvenient to sail in April. We sailed on April 20th and arrived in New York on the morning of May the 1st. In the production of my play, The Sailing on a Boat That Would Bring Me to New York by the 1st of May, I played the 4 most important characters in my drama. As the producer, I decided to sail on a specific ship at a certain time. Playing the part of author, I wrote the script. I visualized the interaction which conformed to the outer action I would take if my desire were realized. As the director, I rehearsed myself, the actor, in that imagined action of climbing the gangplank until that action felt completely natural. This being done, events and people moved swiftly to conform in the outer world to the play I had constructed and enacted in my imagination. I saw the mystic vision flow and live in men and woods and streams until I could no longer know the stream of life from my own dreams. George William Russell.
I love that story. That's a fabulous story. And
amazing?
I love it for a lot of reasons. I love it because it does a great job of illustrating his use of the 4 of the author, the director, the producer, and the actor. But I also love it because he shows his humanity in it. I mean, he describes how he, first time he tried in his imagination to climb the gangplank, he couldn't get to the top. He brought himself back down and tried again and again. Right. He couldn't remember how many times he tried to do it.
And then one of the times he fell asleep.
Right. Then he fell asleep. We've all done that. Well, how nice to know Neville went through the same thing.
Right, exactly.
I mean, exactly, so many of these stories, so often stories are about how I did it so perfectly, right? I did everything perfectly, and look at the perfect result I got. And the rest of us feel like, oh my God, what a standard.
Well, I also love that he told this story, and he mentions that he was like the last person on a long waiting list.
Yes.
And, some of us would automatically be like, well, they're not going to call me. I saw how far down I am. Mm-hmm. There's 20 people ahead of me or 100 people or whatever. But he just did this anyway.
Yeah.
And interesting that they called other people before him.
They
and
did.
Everyone else had already, found a way or changed their plans.
Yep.
Very interesting.
So basically wiped out all the preconception, all that preconception that could have been built up in his mind, which he didn't build up apparently.
Didn't, yeah.
But it could have built up in his mind. All that preconception, as it turned out, was for naught because that's not actually how it was going to play out.
So I love how this chapter ends because he says, I told this story to an audience of mine in San Francisco, and a lady in the audience told me how she had unconsciously used the same technique when she was a young girl.
Can hardly wait.
And you and I have had these discussions where we're like, I think I did this without knowing what I was doing. Right?
Yeah.
He says the incident occurred on Christmas Eve. She was feeling very sad and tired and sorry for herself. Her father, whom she adored, had died suddenly. Not only did she feel this loss at the Christmas season, but necessity had forced her to give up her planned college years and go to work. This rainy Christmas Eve, she was riding home on a San Diego streetcar. The car was filled with gay chatter of happy young people home for the holidays. To hide her tears from those round about her, she stood on the open part of the front of the car and turned her face into the skies to mingle her tears with the rain. With her eyes closed and holding the rail of the car firmly, this is what she said to herself. This is not the salt of the tears that I taste, but the salt of the sea in the wind. This is not San Diego, this is the South Pacific, and I am sailing into the Bay of Samoa. And looking up in her imagination, she constructed what she imagined to be the Southern Cross. She lost herself in this contemplation so that all faded round about her. Suddenly, she was at the end of the line and home. 2 weeks later, she received word from a lawyer in Chicago that he was holding $3,000 in American bonds for her. Several years before, an aunt of hers had gone to Europe with instructions that these bonds be turned over to her niece if she did not return to the United States. The lawyer had just received word of the aunt's death and now was carrying out her instructions.
Wow.
A month later, this girl sailed for the islands in the South Pacific. It was night when she entered the Bay of Samoa. Looking down, she could see the white foam like a bone in the lady's mouth as the ship plowed through the waves and brought the salt of the sea in the wind. An officer on duty said to her, "There's the Southern Cross." And looking up, she saw the Southern Cross as she had imagined it. In the intervening years, she had many opportunities to use her imagination constructively, but as she had done this unconsciously, she did not realize there was a law behind it all. Now that she understands, she too is consciously playing her 4 major roles in the daily drama of her life, producing plays for the good of others as well as herself. And he closes with a quote from John. Then the soldiers, when they had crucified Jesus, took his garments and made 4 parts, to every soldier a part, and also his coat. Now the coat was without seam woven from the top throughout.
Very cool story. And you're right. We've all talked about and told situations where we unconsciously applied the law of attraction in our own lives and didn't know that we were doing it, and learned later, like, oh, yeah. So I guess that must have been what that was back then when I was doing this thing that I didn't realize was actually connecting into a law. Which, I mean, it makes sense. As we learn what a new law is, like a law of physics or whatever, we say, well, yeah, I've been doing that all my life. I may not have known what the law was, but sure.
Good point. Yeah.
You know?
And I also love that the author in this quartet writes the end scene.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we do when we write the end scene is we just jump over all the hows.
Yes.
It doesn't matter.
Good
and
thing too.
We don't let all those hows trip us up.
I mean, if Neville had allowed the author to write everything up until and including the part where he walked up the gangplank, he never would have walked up the gangplank because he would have been stopped by the fact that he was last on the list. You know?
Right, exactly. And that's the thing, is that these vignettes should be short and sweet so that we don't fall asleep halfway up the gangplank. Exactly, so that our mind doesn't go over to somewhere else. And it still will, but it's much easier to get in the rhythm of rehearsing it over and over when it's short. And it should be the end. It should be the outcome you want, or the result, right?
The end result.
Love it. This was really good. I'm really glad we chose this book.
I'm glad we did
the first
too.
2 chapters.
Yeah, good way to get started on this and have another Neville book to talk about for a few weeks here. Before we go, I want to remind people, not only do we talk about the Facebook group Pivot Pals, but we also want to encourage those who are not yet subscribers to become subscribers. Very easy to do. Just go to loatoday.net, and at the top of the page it will instruct you on how to do it in just a few clicks. And also, Cindy, tell people how anyone who might be interested in reaching out for a little personal attention can reach Cindy Chavez, the life coach, because she's an excellent life coach. I know her personally.
Thank you. I would love you to reach out. You can find me at my home on the web, cindychavez.com, CINDIECHAVEZ.com. I hope you'll come by and give me a shout.
And I hope that you're going to be coming back next week because we got a good book going here, kiddo. This is good. I'm enjoying this. Yeah, sounds great. Thank you, live streamers. I'm sorry I couldn't interact with you. I'll get that fixed for next time. Thank you to our podcast listeners as well. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.